Dr. Jessica Rabin, who is your favorite professional on social media who is not a mental health professional that you like to follow?
I think right now my favorite is Dr. Jessica Nurick. I hope I'm saying her last name right. She's a PhD registered dietitian. She posts a lot of great content calling out misinformation about health and nutrition, and I just love eating her content up.
That's what I was going to say. What is it about her content or how she represents herself on social media that you enjoy?
One, she is very detailed and nuanced, which I value. But two, she calls out misinformation, which I think is so needed on social media when you have people with no background and training making certain claims that are often not backed by science. And she often will show the claim and then cite the research and basically just debunk everything that the person said, which I love. I love.
Of course, you love evidence, facts, data. This is the Dr. Jess I know and love.
Oh, absolutely. Can I throw it back at you? Do you have a
Yeah.
favorite non-mental health creator that's a professional right now?
And this is interesting because it's definitely going to lead into our conversation. Have you ever seen Tampa Bree? She's a realtor.
No.
Here's the thing about Tampa Bree. And I don't know anything about realtor ethics or professionalism. But when we think of a realtor, you picture something, just like as we're going to get into with whatever. And that's our own image, maybe based on experience, whatever. Tampa Bree combines stand-up comedy with showing you a house for sale. I wouldn't recommend it for your children. It's adult content, but it's something so refreshing for me, the stuffiness of like realtors that it feels funny, relatable. And I'm actually paying attention more to a house than if a realtor's like, hey, here's this, whatever, house none of us can afford to find nowadays. But she combines this stand-up comedy and, again, adult content, but it's so different than the norm and leads us into sort of this bigger conversation of professionalism, ethics. But part of me, in thinking about mental health professionals, what do you think draws us or others to social media to begin with?
I mean, I can speak for me, and then maybe you can jump in with your thoughts as well. But one, we're millennials, so we were already on social media. We are the first generation that had MySpace and Zanga and all of those things. But I think for me and many others, it's a different way to get our knowledge and our passions out there to people that can't access therapy. We're in the US. Therapy is not accessible. For me, it's also turned into a way to combat misinformation on a broader scale. And I know for many people, not me specifically, it's a way to market themselves and their services. In private practice, we don't have to now take out ads in the newspaper. You can create a social media profile, market your services. And I think it's just a way to access more people.
I agree with everything you said. There's something freeing about being a professional on social media that you're not tied to sort of like all these, complicated hoops of like, I can't even imagine like taking out an ad in a paper. People probably took ads out in magazines, television, radio. Now you can, within minutes, use your phone like most of us do. And the barrier of entry to create content on social media has never been lower. So there's something really egalitarian and awesome about that of like, we can all be on there sharing the education we've been privileged enough to get and connect with people, over this knowledge, this education, ending stigma, whatever exactly your angle might be. But it almost feels like any setting you would work in, there would be some sort of benefit from you sharing on social media.
Oh yeah, I absolutely agree. And one thing I also just thought of as you were talking too, it's a different way to use our skills. Like
Right.
therapy is a science, it's also an art. But creating content on social media taps, at least for me, and I think for you too, with how long I've known you, taps into a different type of like creativity and outlet. And maybe we can share information in a way that we wouldn't exactly share in a therapy room because it's a different format.
I think that's so true. And again, there can be a lot of different styles of how people present in therapy, but I feel like personally, a lot of a therapy session is spent for me listening. It's not a
Absolutely.
lecture. It's not a PowerPoint, it's me learning about someone. And of course, there's times where, maybe I'm talking about a pattern or something, or I'm explaining something psychoed, but it feels so different, right? When we create content that you're able, again, to share information, show sides of you that sort of normalize mental health. And we all have boundaries around that, which we're going to get into. But again, it feels vast in the ways that as professionals, we can use and show up on social media.
Oh, absolutely. And you just used the word vast. And one thing I think for me that I love about social media is I work with children and teens. That is not the audience I am connecting with on social media. Like, yes, I do have like teens that follow me, but like I can also like connect with and create content for people that aren't sitting in my therapy room or I'm not seeing in the hospital. And if, there's something that an article I read or something that is trending in the news that's really interesting, I can comment on it or share insights that wouldn't maybe naturally come up in a therapy session. So it's just tapping into, I don't know, different parts of my brain.
I don't think we can overstate how cool that is in this era. Because like part of my background in undergrad was in broadcasting. And like to be someone that would like be on PBS, and I got lucky, like I got to do a little like
So
morning news show for high schools in Ohio on
that's
PBS.
awesome.
I thought I was like, this was the biggest breakthrough of my life, that maybe a few hundred schools in Ohio had to see my face talking about like the news locally. But like nowadays, any person can take something that happened in the news, comment on it, and potentially have this seen not just by hundreds or thousands, but millions of people. That is
Absolutely.
something like if you would have told my millennial brain in the year, 2005, I'd be like, well, no, there'd probably be so many hoops you would have to jump through for even like hundreds of people to hear what you have to say.
You're like, no, it's only my top 8 on MySpace that's going to see.
Gosh, there's part of me that's glad that era's over. Like, I don't want to be ranking anyone anymore.
Ranking our friends. Yeah, I agree with that.
But let's break down a little bit about what we're talking about here, because I see people talk about this all the time. Professionalism, ethical. When you hear the term professional, someone either being professional or not professional, but just the term professional, what comes to mind for you? What do you think of?
I think of someone that has had specific training in a field of some sort. They're competent in whatever their skill set is, or can I use the term profession when you ask me to define professional?
Oh, there's no rules here on drop-in. Do whatever.
Yeah, and I think maybe like a reliable source of information, generally speaking. Yeah, those are the
That's
main things that come to mind.
that somebody has done something to earn like credibility,
Yeah.
for a lack of a better word. Yeah, and part of me thinks in also the way the term professional is used, sometimes it's like the optics of someone acting professional It's sort of like the optics we see of how they communicate, sort of the outside presentation that can have a lot of subjectivity to it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. When you say it that way too, it's interesting because I think the way I defined it is more about like the individual and what they earned, and then like acting professional or professionalism typically is how other people perceive your behavior. Like yes, we can all determine like there's certain things that would be considered unprofessional basically wherever you go in your job. But I think the level of professionalism is often determined by other people's perspective or other, like, I was going to say like undefined standards. Like, yeah, there's probably like my hospital has rules for professionalism for like closed-toed shoes in the hospital and things like that. But I feel like if you surveyed like 100 people, what would you define as like professional behavior? We would get 100 different answers.
And that's why I'm glad we're starting on this part for this podcast of there is something that I see that people wrestle with on the internet about this. And this is where a lot of different components come in. But even, if we go back old school dress, what is professional dress? And behind that, of course, we have to ask, where the hell does these sort of norms come from? Who made them?
Yeah.
Who determined we have to wear suit jackets or whatever it might be? But to your point, there is something about professionalism that we have to ask ourselves is, where is this coming from? Is this a personal opinion? And is there ever going to be consensus?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's interesting because I would say like for defining professionalism, I think it would be harder to get a consensus than defining unprofessional behavior. Because as you were just talking about like dress, like, yes, if you're thinking, oh, dress professional, a lot of people still probably think like suits or dresses or slacks. But the reality is, and yes, I just said slacks like I'm 80 years old. I feel like, at least in the therapy realm, many people, especially in like private practice, aren't wearing suits or like they're dressing for comfort, which I don't know who's to say that's professional or not. I mean, maybe don't show up in a bathing suit. Like, as I don't know, but maybe you're in Florida, so maybe therapists in Florida do. I don't know.
Oh, don't start sprinkling the nuance, the context, Jess. But that it's interesting because that's what it's about, and that has been a bit of my experience of like from grad school, going through that, starting in 2007, and how different it is now of like how things have sort of come along and been more inclusive and honoring different cultures, and us sort of coming to this consensus of like, whoever made these rules, again, do they signify diversity, people from other cultures? And then there's things that, get a little bit interesting, like, texting our clients or starting sessions on time. What does on time mean? And so there's a lot of things we could sort of bring up in professionalism. Do you see professionalism being discussed on social media?
I see professionalism being discussed in the context of when people perceive others as unprofessional. I will say I've seen this recent trend. I don't know if you have seen it, about like, should therapists drink in session, like drink water and like coffee in session? And I wanted to clarify. And like, is that professional or not? And I was like, I have literally never thought twice about drinking water in session, because if I'm parched, I think it's much more professional for me to take a sip of water than cough on my client.
Do you know what the take is for the not of like drinking water or coffee?
No, I don't. And like, I've only seen people talk about like, oh, there's arguments over if therapists should or not, but I've never seen the original source. But like something like that, I'm like, or I've seen it in the context of like therapists that make content make content on social media where people, and I see this with teachers a lot too. Oh, you're not dressing in a way that's quote unquote professional. Or, you posted a video of you out with your friends, at a club. That's not professional. It's like, well, I wasn't with my therapy client at a club. So yeah, I don't know. What have you seen with regard to like professionalism discussions?
Everything you're naming.
Okay.
Of like, and again, to use Tampa Bree as an example, people are gonna like maybe
I have to look her up.
the page. I know for certain people look at her content and be like, this is unprofessional for a realtor. She is getting so much love from fellow millennials who are like, we love how relatable you are. And again, I think the question that gets asked here is, how would I want my realtor to be? For me,
Yeah.
if I could get Tampa Bree as my realtor, and now she's too big, she'd be like, you don't have enough money for me. I don't know that she'd say that, but I would do it in a heartbeat because there's something so relatable. And she talks about her own mental health. And it's just like, if in the opinion of like a stuffy sort of like unpersonal realtor, which of course there's all variety, or this realtor who's literally making me laugh and is a comedian, I'm going to take the comedian, even if, I'm sure a lot of people look at that and be like, that's not how I'm used to a realtor being.
Yeah.
But it is this, I've seen it with teachers and dress, and a topic that comes up a lot in our profession is like cursing. And you get into these nuanced dialogue of like, it always depends. It depends on the context. It depends on how it's received by, the client, the student. I don't even know what realtors calls. I guess they call
A client.
the client. Yeah. But to me, there's so much of that is how is it being received versus to say like a therapist shouldn't cuss in session. And culturally, when I was in the Deep South, I think that was more the norm. Living in South Florida and working a lot with teens as well, there's a lot of matching language if you curse to curse along with.
Yeah. Oh, I totally agree with that. Like, I actually had a client recently. It's a newer client. It was like, are you allowed to curse in session? I was like, I am. Like, if like exactly what you were saying. If a teen is cursing in session, I'm not going to reflect back like a watered down version. However, if I'm working with a 7-year-old in the hospital, I'm not going to be cursing in the room. It goes back to context. And honestly, even if the parents are like cursing, I'm probably not going to reflect back cursing in front of their young child. But it's different with teens. And one thing that you brought up too when you were talking about Tampa Bree is like the relatability aspect. And I think that brings in a whole nuanced discussion of like, especially for millennials, I feel like a lot of people want their professionals, whatever that is, their doctors, their realtors, their teachers, their, I don't know, CPAs, dentists to be relatable. But does relatability automatically mean they're unprofessional? And I think a lot of our generation and Gen Z would probably argue no. So I do wonder if there's also a generational difference as well. Then we get into like boomers and, oh my gosh, you're not wearing a suit and tie to work, Justin. How dare you? Like,
and it's so much of the norm, what people are used to and what they feel like they connect with, which is, again, in social media land, if I don't connect with this, then you shouldn't. Versus to say, let me reflect on the context of me a little bit. My age, my generation, where I live, because again, even dress as professionals in subtropical South Florida where I live versus when I lived in Alabama, it's night and day dress. It's very different. And not just because it's, super hot and humid versus, more of a mild temperature, but because there's a huge cultural difference.
oh, absolutely.
So yeah, I say that of like all this, if we've done nothing else within the professionalism realm, we've held for people, it's so nuanced and it
Hmm.
depends on who you are, the situation, and sort of the variables that make you you in how you view what you're seeing and experiencing.
Yeah. Good summary.
Ethical, ethical. Now we bridge over to the ethical, which is different. And
Yeah,
I see people confuse these two all the time. Meaning,
absolutely.
people will say that's unprofessional and therefore it's unethical.
Ethical. Hmm.
What is ethical or unethical? Like, what comes to mind when you hear that?
So honestly, the first thing that comes to mind, at least for mental health professionals, is we have an ethics code. If we are abiding by our ethics code, we are acting ethically. If we are breaking something in our ethics code, we are acting unethically. And like, yes, even with ethics codes, some things are very clear. In the therapy realm, you do not sleep with your clients. Full stop. Like, like that is a clear
Yeah.
ethical violation. There are some others that probably have more gray to it, but I think if somebody's acting ethically, they're following the ethics code, they're upholding like do no harm. When it comes to social media, they're not breaking confidentiality by posting things about their clients. But just like you, Justin, I see all the time people not only conflating professionalism with ethics, but also just conflating things they don't like with being unethical as well.
All the time. And so to be clear, we're both licensed psychologists. And
Hmm.
so as you said, we have the APA ethics code, which the APA ethics code doesn't have a ton to say about social media. It's
No.
not lengthy, and I know they're always sort of working on that. A lot of the things, and please like add to this of what I'm
Hmm.
missing, but a lot of the things that I've read is about, of course, confidentiality,
Hmm.
which is meaning if you're working with a client that you don't ruin their confidentiality, talking about them, giving away their information. That's like a golden rule. Um, Additionally, it's like how we represent ourselves in misinformation being
Yep.
accurate is
Yep.
such a huge aspect of the work that we do. And there's sometimes that I've seen misinformation from
Hmm.
professionals. And sometimes it's questionable whether, again, they're not just not up to date on research or, again, what sort of is going on there. It can be very nuanced in that sense. Um, the other things to sort of come up often are not simulating therapy
Yep.
on social media.
Correct.
It's been a big one. I don't know if you've observed that or have concerns about that for yourself.
Yeah, I think that one is tricky from the standpoint of I don't think it's tricky not to simulate therapy. Like I
Sure.
think a lot of us have like we don't respond to DMs, disclaimers like uh Instagram or whatever social media platform is not therapy. We're not offering like individual, intervention or advice. But I think it's tricky because we can only control our behavior and the content we put out. We cannot control how other people receive it. So if we're putting out there, like, you're a big mindfulness guy, like videos on different mindfulness strategies as general psychoeducation, and someone sees that content and is like, oh, Justin is a psychologist and he's telling me to do this. And then it doesn't work for them because, for whatever reason, because not all coping skills work for people. And then they're like, Justin, you said this, and you're like, I was just making this general
Mhm.
video. Or people, we can probably get into this with parasocial relationships, and then they're trying to reach out to us for more nuanced advice, or people in the comments that, ask certain things based on a post and go into more details. And I think that's where it can get sticky, because I don't know about you, but as a professional, like, I don't at this point respond to anything that's like suicidal crisis, things like that. But it can be also hard as a professional because you're like, we're in this to help other people, but that's going to cross a boundary and blur some
It,
lines.
it blurs the lines instantly.
Yeah.
As soon as you start responding to someone, again, you haven't entered a professional relationship, but what are you opening yourself up to? Do you have to respond to their response? Do you have to make sure that, they follow through with this hotline you gave them? And there's something even bigger behind all of this, which is you don't even know that they're a real person.
Yep.
And I that wasn't an issue necessarily 7, 8 years ago, or maybe it was and we just didn't know about it. Nowadays, it's hard to know. I don't know if you're a real human being. I don't know if you're a bot. I don't
Yeah.
know if you're phishing for, to scam me. And so it becomes tough out there. But to your point, whether it's on lives, certain podcasts, I've certainly witnessed back and forth where I'm like, damn, that looks a lot like therapy.
Yep.
And I have felt that just personally of when I do lives, I try to answer people's questions. I try to be helpful. The line between answering a question versus digging into someone's background, narrative, collecting information about them, and then trying to be helpful, ooh, that's starting to look a lot like therapy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also hard too, because I know so many of us on social media do want to provide like psychoeducation, which may include coping skills. So, like the first thing coming to mind, the tip skill from DBT. Like, it is so easy to make a video on the tip skill of DBT, but that's very different than, say, somebody's on your live and is asking questions and you're giving them the tip skill, but then asking more. And I think it's easy to fall into that, even if you're trying to be as ethical as possible.
It gets really gray. It really does. And for me, the line is often that, am I gathering information that is starting to simulate a back and forth where this could start to look like therapy?
Yeah.
Versus like, and again, sometimes in questions, it can be really hard. Like, for example, you can get the question that is, I'm in this huge fight with my partner. They're not listening to me. They never listen to me. Should I break up with them? You look at that, you're like, oh, I have no idea.
I have no idea. I don't know you.
I don't know. But it's funny because over the years, you get used to trying to be helpful without simulating therapy. Like for me, I might be like, listen, I think sometimes we avoid having certain conversations. And I try to speak in generalities of like, we can hit points in our relationships where there's doubt and there's unknowns and there's sort of painful things that either we're going to connect over or we're going to sort of avoid and bow out. And it's a tough choice that people make. Again, I'm just shooting from the hip, but there's sort of these situations where you're like, how can I answer generally without sort of getting in the weeds of like making a treatment plan for you? I don't know you. I didn't do a biopsychosocial on you. And there is a risk for me to lean so heavily into this therapeutic realm without all this context. That's the
Absolutely.
risk.
Well, and then going back to your question of ethics, then you get into ethics of not being like, you don't know where this person is located. For anyone listening that's not aware, which I'm sure your audience is, like, we can only practice in the states that we are licensed in, unless you have like SciPact or an interstate compact where you can practice in the states as part of that compact. You don't know the crisis resources in their area, and I know you've experienced this because I've definitely experienced this, and you go live way more than I do. But I've also found that, a lot of times people want their question, like their specific question that dives into a lot of details, answered so much. And I've seen you do it. I've done it. Like, I just kind of skip over and will answer more general questions. And then they keep asking and asking and asking. And I don't necessarily blame these individuals because, as we said earlier, therapy is not accessible to so
That's the
many
thing.
people, and they see, oh, this psychologist is going on live and they're having a mental health hour Q&A. Let me try to get my question answered. But it can be hard. Or you start with a general question, then somebody comes in with a follow-up that gets like more personal, and then you're like, oh, I need to like reel it in.
It's so tough. And again, the reason why we lean into this is because we want therapy and information, again, information about therapeutic things and mental health to be more accessible.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean it replaces therapy. But
Mm-hmm.
you and I both know there are plenty of people who are just not going to be face to face in front of a mental health professional for
Absolutely.
many reasons. And that's when we hope our content is helpful. We hope we can provide and point towards resources and other things that could be. But again, the more in depth you get with any one individual, boy, it blurs that line.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So I don't know if anything else specifically APA has said about social media comes to mind before I'll sort of talk about, or we can talk about the principles that generally guide us.
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head with most of them. I don't have the like what social media guidelines for psychologists that came out in 2021 memorized, but it's like, confidentiality, not emulating therapy, making sure that your content or the information you're putting out is accurate and upholds, the field of psychology. I'm pretty sure there's stuff on like risks and benefits of using it. So like one of the things is like, if you're on social media, people can find you and learn more about you, which I know we can talk about as well. But no, I think you hit the main ones that were coming to mind.
Because the principles, ironically, is what a lot of us in our ethical trainings have learned to try to grab hold of to navigate the perpetual gray, which sort of can
Mm-hmm.
be a lot of these things. And so one of them that comes to mind is the sort of balance in mental math of beneficence and non-maleficence. And
Mm-hmm.
I can never freaking say those words.
I
So
can't either.
if I had like an ovation button, like not to like whatever, I can't believe, and I probably didn't even say it right, but like the way I
Not
wish those
maleficence.
were,
Yeah, I think you said it right.
I just wish in some ways it was doing good as best good as we can and not doing bad, not doing
Mm-hmm.
harm. Because
Yeah.
this is the mental math I think a lot of us go through of what good could this do?
Yeah.
And what is the potential harm?
Harm. Yeah.
And
I was going to say, and I think for me, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this as well, that second part, the potential harm on social media is a lot. I feel like there's a lot more risk from the standpoint of you don't know who is coming across your content. You don't know their background or history. You don't know how they're going to interpret your post or video. I'm sure we both have had experiences where we have put something out completely intending one thing and people have interpreted it a different way. I was originally going to say misinterpret, but I don't actually think that's the right word because like perception is, we all have our own perception where in like the therapy room or if you're doing assessment, it's a lot in my mind easier to kind of figure out risk benefit or if there is a rupture of some sort or if something comes across the wrong way you're going to get automatic feedback from the person sitting across from you. Maybe they're making a face and like, wait, what did you mean? And then you can do that repair. Social media, you can make a post, go see 8 clients in a day, come back hours later, and you have all these comments and you're like, whoa, like I didn't even consider someone was going to interpret that this way. And like sometimes you disagree, but sometimes you're like, wow, like now that they pointed that out, totally see. And that was my blind spot. So yeah, I don't know your thoughts
I
on
love
that.
what you shared there. God, have I had that experience. And if anybody out there posted, hundreds or so videos, I would almost guarantee you would collect that experience.
Oh, absolutely.
Meaning all of us are looking through our own lens. And you're trying to, again, be like, who could this benefit? Who is sort of the receiver of this? What is impossible is to guarantee in any video that there is zero harm to someone.
Correct.
You can't know that. Like, and again, this is like a bad example, but it's the first example coming to mind of like dog bites in the United States. There's 2.5 million dog bite cases in the United States every year. You posting about your dog could re-traumatize someone.
Absolutely. I also just like how you know that fact.
I've used this before. This is not on the fly, so don't be impressed. This is something I've used before because I think it's something a lot of us relate to. A lot of us are dog lovers. We love animals. You share a little thing in your story, or you talk about dogs, and there's some research out there that dogs can be therapeutic. That does not mean it could not be triggering to someone out there.
Yeah.
We know that exists.
Absolutely.
So I say that as an example of, if you're going to share something about your dog, does that mean you shouldn't do it? Because for someone out there, that's going to be triggering.
Yeah. I mean, and that's hard. And I think that's where you have to weigh in, like, does the good outweigh the bad? Like, okay, so yes, if somebody that has a phobia of dogs because they were attacked by a dog comes across my video, it could be triggering. Is that going to be the majority? Is that my target audience? And I think that's hard too, because with social media, like sometimes videos and posts really only go to your followers and target audience, and they kind of know you and they know exactly what you mean. And other times, maybe this person that has a phobia of dogs has like made their algorithm so they don't get any dog content, but somehow because you also had a beach in the background and they like beach content, the algorithm showed them. Like, you don't know. Like, we don't have control over that. And I agree. I think it's not about like, I mean, I think we could argue there's some things you probably just shouldn't post, but in a situation like that, if we thought of every single possible risk, nobody could post or nobody that cares and wanted to engage ethically and professionally would post on social media.
This inlines because you're nailing it on the head of the reality that a lot of us who posted a lot of content would tell you or tell anybody, is that it's impossible to avoid all harm. And if you're ethical and you're a person of value, you try to run this mental math, maybe not even deliberately, but in thinking about. But I think a lot of people, and this is not in me, at all, feel how you feel. And I wouldn't minimize that at all. But I think what happens a lot on social media is this sort of, this upset me, you shouldn't have done this and should take it down. And the hard thing to hold, and I could give a specific example on this. There can be a lot of, joking around about heroin use and drug use. And I've been open about that's how my brother passed away. I think, and I've seen so many examples of that, even in like dancing trends and stuff, where people like, incorporate in like the shooting up motion.
Okay.
Obviously, it hits me in a very different way.
Yeah.
However, when I see these things, can I hold that they're not thinking, about the harm that could be being done? And it's not to say they shouldn't be, but I do hold this truth of, it's impossible to conceptualize every single person's narrative and truth. What we want to do is try to think broadly and listen to people who do, share their voice and have a perspective. But I'm with you in that you would never create any content ever, because if I almost dare you in a way to think of a topic, because my brain could think of the person who could be harmed by that, and then what are we to do?
Yeah. And I think that is the hard part about showing up on social media, and the gray that comes with it is that question you just posed, like, what are we to do? Because we are not sitting in a therapy room with one client. Going back to, we haven't done a psychosocial assessment. We don't know how our posts are going to come across. I mean, I've even seen, and I don't know if you've seen this as well, but like other mental health professionals, I can think of a couple off the top of my mind who will also post that they like run or work out. And I've seen them get negative feedback, like, you posting your Garmin that has the calories burned on your run is triggering to me because of X, Y, and Z. And that is a valid feeling. And I'm sure the person didn't post it with any malintent, or even maybe thought that to think to block out the calories. They were like posting, oh, I ran 5 miles today or whatever. But it's hard because we don't know who's going to come across our content. And then as professionals, we can't, I don't want to say we can't be responsible, because that also, this is a nuanced conversation.
Yeah.
We can't hold responsibility for every single reaction that comes across our content. That's how I'll word that.
This is the conversation you could never have just in like a short content clip on social media.
Absolutely not.
Because it is so nuanced and it takes a lot of individual and personal reflection from anyone. And the unfortunate thing is the truth lies somewhere in the middle of exactly what you're saying, of it's not that people should just post whatever. And we go to almost the toxic masculinity of like, oh, have your feelings, bro. Like, who cares? I hate that. I hate that with a passion. And the other side is an impossibility of, you can't avoid every harm for every human that exists out there. There's too much diversity. So somewhere in the middle is this willingness to try to consider what the context of this message is. And for us, even for me, if I'm triggered by something, of can I hold some sort of context out there of maybe what their message was trying to do, who they were trying to connect with, how it could be beneficial for somebody. And that doesn't mean my perspective, doesn't matter in a way, but it does hold this middle ground that we would want for ourselves if we were the ones posting.
Absolutely.
It's rough out there. You certainly get the most attention if there's more emotionality added to it. And unfortunately, sometimes that blocks out the context in which something was delivered. And can we hold that people are allowed to have both truths? And often when I see these things unravel on social media, especially when I'm not involved, I can see both sides.
Absolutely.
And that is where I'm like, wow, the truth actually lies somewhere in the middle. And I understand their perspective and I understand theirs. But that is not what gets you views on social media. What gets you views on social media is often demonizing the other person and making your point in a black and white sort of view.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think that's definitely something that no ethics code, to my knowledge, addresses, is like navigating getting the information out there while also not falling in the trap of the algorithm. And like, because you do get rewarded, and I'm not speaking like financially rewarded, but rewarded from like, oh, I put a lot of effort into this video and now people are commenting and liking, and like my hard work paid off. And to your point, just like any type of media, I like that you use the word emotionality, the strong hook at the beginning that says something that elicits a strong emotion is gonna get more views than, say, a lot of the content I make, which is me like talking for a solid 2 minutes about an educational topic with resources. And I didn't used to always make that content, because that content, generally speaking, doesn't get as wide of reach, which, there's the balance there. It's not about views, but if you're putting this important message out, it's reach. And I think that also ties into another principle of like integrity. And we kind of touched on this with regard to like just on social media, making sure the information we're putting out there is accurate. But, that's the whole principle of integrity, that we need to be accurate, honest, and truthful in our field. We're talking about the APA ethics code here, so for psychologists, and not that people that make those high emotionality videos aren't doing so with integrity, but I think in my perspective, a lot of times that nuance is lost, or there's blanket statements that maybe aren't as accurate of a representation of the topic, because a nuanced, accurate discussion takes more than 30 seconds. And that's hard too. Like, you want to be and have integrity, you want to show up, you want to represent the field. And I think I mean, I don't want to speak for you, but I have definitely fallen into that trap. Like, oh, this is a trend. I know this will get me views. Let me stick some mental health terms onto it and see how it goes. Which, I mean, for better or for worse, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm with you in that, like, when you put a lot of energy into something, you would like it to reach, more people. But I agree with you that there's this unconscious thing sort of turning over. I think a lot of it comes from our president here in the United States, of people feel sort of emboldened to say highly emotional things to hook you in.
Yeah,
And just the reflective question I try to ask myself is, if I was at a professional conference, is this the way I would start this conversation with somebody?
I love that.
Because there's so many, and I mean, if I put it blunt, is like, would I say it like this to somebody's face? And
Yeah.
like, I know, and unfortunately, I see a lot of professionals falling into that, especially when they're talking to and about other professionals. And I'm not at all saying people don't need to be called out. That is
Yeah.
not what I'm saying. There's plenty of things that need to be called out. But what I'm saying is, when you sort of model the profession, are you having a dialogue like you would have in a professional setting? Or are you hooking people's amygdalas and therefore pulling people in and creating something that is more absolute, more black and white, and less nuanced than what it would be face to face?
Yeah. And you bringing up professionals calling out other professionals, I agree with you. I think if we see unethical behavior, and I mean, that is part of our ethical guidelines. If you see unethical behavior, you have to, I was going to say call it out. Obviously, there's steps, like you approach the person first and then you go to their supervisor and things like that. But social media, it's a different ballpark. It's not your colleague who's sharing an office next to you that you see unethical. But I think I've seen, at least, that unfortunately at times gives non-therapy people a negative perspective of mental health professionals. They're like, oh, these mental health professionals are bickering, or should this been a private DM? And this is kind of leading into a whole nother conversation, but it goes back to the idea of like, what is professional and what is ethical. And even if the intent is, hey, I'm calling out this really unprofessional and harmful behavior, so the intent might be good, but how it's received is, oh, these two adult therapists are bickering on the internet.
Yeah, the APA, I'll tell you what the APA ethics code doesn't say. It says, if you see unethical behavior, make a video with a really emotional hook to get a lot of viewers' attention. That way you get more views, comments, and it helps you, versus contacting that person directly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that got lost somewhere in the mix. It's a different era, and it's, I think it has pros and its cons in that, but I think it is interesting of like, I think if people were being real with themselves, a lot of things people do are for views. And what's getting lost is this message actually really important? And is correcting this behavior really important? If so, I should probably try to have a direct conversation with that individual. And again, this is in the professional lens. And I think a lot of professionals have sort of dropped that, and they're like, I'm going to be a call out account like these non-professionals are, and just rip people that I have never actually met or talked to in real life. And again, what gets lost in a lot of that is context. And again, I'm not at all saying people don't need to be called out. I'm not
Yeah.
saying that. But I've certainly seen situations where in my head, I'm like, I'm not sure if you're really doing that because you want to correct the message or if you knew that was just going to get you a lot of views.
Yeah. I mean, I can speak to what I do. Like, if I do see there's something, and I hate getting into like therapist social media drama, I might make a post that's generally talking
Yeah.
about the topic.
The topic.
Or something I do, like if I make a video out of high emotions, I keep it in my draft for at least 24 hours. And most often, then I delete it because I like watch it back and I'm like, okay, am I doing that because this was a trending topic or this was other people were talking about it and I felt like I need to jump in? Or does this align with who I am? And a lot of times it actually falls in the middle. It's like, okay, it aligns with who I am, but the way the message, now that I'm watching it back 24 hours later, is coming across is that, high emotionality. Let me re-record something that, I don't know, it is more reflective of like what I want to say. But also I feel like a lot of people don't do that. And that's not me saying like, oh, I'm better, but like I've definitely impulsively made videos and posted them. And going back to the algorithm and things like that, whether consciously or unconsciously, if there is a topic, you want to jump on that topic within that first 24, 48 hours because 72 hours later, there's going to be something else happening. And yeah, I don't know. It is hard because we don't really, like, yes, the APA has guidelines that they published in 2021. And I would argue that the internet and content creation and professionals, not just mental health professionals showing up online, has shifted a ton since 2021. And to my knowledge, as psychologists, like the APA is the only organization that has separate social media guidelines. I think like social workers, licensed marriage and family therapists have like in their actual ethical guidelines, like a social media section. But, and somebody, if you have a different degree and I'm wrong on that, please call me out on that. But to my understanding, like the APA is, I don't know, the only ones with these separate guidelines. And they're 5 years old at this point.
And to your point, things change so fast. And that was going to be a question I was going to ask you is like, in your time of like creating content, what have you noticed change and shift? Because one thing you mentioned is huge of like, I feel like right now, the era of content is what's happening. Comment on it as fast as you can, which is exhausting. It also leads to a lot of reactive content.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that. One thing I will say, and maybe it's just the people I follow, I feel like when like you and I first started on TikTok back during the pandemic, a lot of mental health content was like following trends, like TikTok trends or whatever, and just putting like a mental health
Spin.
on
Yeah.
it. And I do feel like a lot of people that have continued to make content have shifted more away from that and are trying to be more nuanced or doing direct like 1 to 3 minute videos. I know you do that. I do that, like into the camera, talking about whatever the topic is, which I personally like, but that's the kind of content I make. So that's probably why I like it. I will also say I've seen this shift of like more, especially mental health content creators, adding more, I don't want to say lifestyle content, but things outside of who they like, of them being a therapist. And like to the degree people do that is different. But I've like seen this influx. I don't know if you have, with over the past year, a lot of people like changing their usernames to just like their name rather than like therapist or thing, because they're like, yeah, I'm still making therapy content, but I'm also planning my wedding or I've been traveling a lot and I want to share that. And that's a whole nother conversation. Like, is that okay if you've built your platform off of being a therapist. But then we have the argument, like you brought up earlier, a lot of like millennials and Gen Z want to see the human side of therapists. So I've seen that shift as well. Yeah, I'll pause there and get your thoughts on shifts you've seen.
Yeah, you're nailing it on the head of like the look behind the scenes of like your actual life. Because again, and I don't know if it's because of, Chat GPT and AI, but I feel like the need for information has decreased. And I'm
Mm,
not saying it's non-existent. I think the need for accurate information, well-sourced information, but again, when I first started making content, the basic understanding of like what are the symptoms of depression, I don't remember the last time someone asked me a question like that of something
true.
more. And again, it's not that everyone knows that, but I think most people can get that information very
Hmm.
quickly. And so I do feel like there is more of this pull of what can you give me or show me that is more than I could get even in like the AI run search engines, because there's
Yeah.
AI built into Google now and everything else. Like it's already
Yeah.
there. And so people are getting like quick answers to, like, they're getting information quickly. It's not always accurate. That's a huge issue.
Yeah.
But I have felt there's been a big shift from I want information to I want you to comment in things that I'm viewing right now through your lens of a mental health professional, therapist,
Hmm.
psychologist, whatever it might be. Um,
Yeah.
so
I,
it is. Yeah, it's sort of like, what can you give me more than a robot? If I was going
yeah.
to put it bluntly.
No, I love that. And like hearing you speak, like, yes, I don't think I connected it the way that you did, but I do kind of like reflecting on, I've seen more longer form content or more nuanced take, or even what we were talking about, like having to comment on things now and less of like, here are 3 coping skills for anxiety. And I like that reflection of people probably have access to that information. So that's not what they're looking for. And maybe that balance of like, oh, behind the scenes, this is who I am as a person, to build that kind of, it's a parasocial relationship, but like, you know, that trend of like reasons to follow me or unfollow me. And like you show the behind the scenes, but then you also show like, hey, here's 2 minutes of me nuance talking about whatever the topic is.
I think it normalizes us as humans, which is a huge thing you're not going to get from a textbook. You're not going to get from, the internet per se, of like, it shows who we are as mental health professionals. Not just here's this knowledge I know, but these are some of the ways I live my life. Maybe these are some of the struggles I have. Like there's a lot of opportunity to really be a human that, again, when I first started posting, I rarely saw that. Like I
Yeah.
remember when it was a big deal to say you're a mental health professional who has, a mental health disorder. Like I remember
Mm-hmm.
that was like a bigger deal. The
Yeah.
cool part is I feel like, that's sort of gone, and not that everybody does that. But it's normalized us of like, what is this human experience like? Even for us as professionals, what brought us into it?
Yeah. I mean, and I think that it goes back to the whole professional question, which we really started this discussion on, is, a lot of people love that. And then a lot of people are like, wait, you're showing your workouts. Are you at the beach? You're in a bathing suit, Dr. J. That's not
How dare?
professional. Or your
How
tattoos, or, you're showing yourself out at this fancy restaurant and you're drinking wine, but this is a therapy account. And, going back to, you can upset someone, like,
yeah.
people that struggle with, say, alcoholism or addiction. And so it goes back to all that nuance, and, you can't predict everybody's perception or how they're going to take the content you're putting out there.
Which I wanted to do this little segment, a couple more things before I get you out of here. I always appreciate hijacking your time. I know you're so busy. But this segment is, would you post it?
Oh God. Okay.
I want I want the Dr. Jess perspective. And
Okay.
I feel like I could answer these for you. And then maybe just some of your thoughts in general. If
Okay.
it was somebody else, what you think about this. This is all for a professional. So
Okay.
we'll use mental health professional broadly.
Okay. Okay.
You rocking out at a rock concert.
Oh, I would definitely post that. I posted when I went to When We Were Young Fest. Yeah, I would post that.
No holds bar. You would post it. Would you put it in your story?
I
You
mean,
let people know you're there.
yeah, I would probably post it in my story. I would probably like do a montage, like reel of like a bunch of clips together. But yeah, I don't think I would have any issue posting that. I think the only maybe time I wouldn't post on my story if I had like any like safety concerns about people knowing where I was like at that
Mm.
exact moment. But yeah, I mean, music is a great coping skill.
A- Amen. I know. I got a video where I take my shirt off and jump on my friend Andrew's shoulder that I posted. I'm like,
I,
oh, which, for myself, I was like, this is a little much. But you know what? I was like, it's hot here and it's raining,
yeah,
so I'm going for it for the sake of for the gram, as the kids say. The kids probably don't even say that anymore. So
no,
who cares?
they probably don't.
Would you make a post disclosing your own mental health disorders?
I think it would depend on what the intent of the post was. So, I mean, I've definitely talked about like my own experience. Like, would I make a post that's just listing, like, hey, these are my diagnoses? Probably not. But if I'm like making a post, say, about, teenage depression, and I start by sharing my experience as a teen with depression and getting into therapy, I feel like that could be like helpful content. It has a purpose. I don't think I would just post like a list of diagnoses though. I don't know what like how you envisioned that. Um but
More
yeah, I think it depends.
Of course. And I'm with you. It's like so many, the answer to these is like the how and how we
Yeah.
could see ourselves. Yeah, I've talked openly about getting diagnosed with OCD, what that
Yeah.
looked like, because I'm with you. And I know a lot of professionals who would never disclose this.
Oh, absolutely.
So it's definitely one of those where I'm like, put 100 mental health professionals in a room. Like, would you ever make content disclosing your own, mental health disorders or difficulties? I don't know what the percentage breakdown would be out of 100 mental health professionals, but nothing would
And
shock me.
and one thing I want to add there, I think it would also depend on where the professional is with their mental health journey because
Chris.
there's this whole thing getting back to ethics of like if there is a mental or physical impairment that is preventing you from being able to successfully do your job, like do you need to take a sabbatical or break or whatever it is? And so if somebody's like, hey, I'm like currently going through treatment for this thing, maybe I'm not going to be as open versus like, I went through this treatment for this thing and it helped me. I don't know.
I totally agree with that, of like the nuance of like where are you at? And that's where I see a lot of people, you can tell they're talking about something that not that they overcome and they never deal
Yeah.
with this, but they're comfortable sort of feeling it because they've landed in a place that they feel like they can cope. They feel like they have
Mhm.
understanding. They've done the therapeutic work, and not that that ever ends. We know that
Yeah.
continues on, but I'm with you of like that is important nuance. What about talking openly about your relationship? Maybe struggles in it, sharing details about your relationship.
So I would not, but that's be out of respect for my husband because he is not on social media at all. And I'm also not a relationship therapist. I think if I saw couples or specialized in relationships and had my husband's consent, maybe I would. But for me personally, no, one, because it's not an area of expertise, and two, my husband literally has no social media, like at all. I literally have to send him like links of something. He'll be like, I saw this on YouTube Shorts. And I'm like, that's a TikTok. That was a TikTok like 3 months ago. Like, like no social media at all. He deleted social media like before the pandemic. But I know other people might. And I also think it goes back to what is the content of that. Are you sharing your like deepest, darkest secrets and intimacy difficulties? Or are you making content like you did the other day where you're like, hey, I learned this lesson not to remind my pregnant wife that we only have 14 weeks of pregnancy left. Like
with a baby in the 99th percentile of size. Oh my gosh.
Like, I think that's different too.
I just know your husband has so much peace not being on social media. I just pictured him levitating in his peacefulness of just not being on it.
Oh, I'll be like, did you see this? And he's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm like, it must be so nice. Just live like, he'll like look at the news and stuff like that, but I'll be like talking, and he's like, I have no, like his job, actually, you'll appreciate this. You know, that trend of like putting baby pictures and it's like, this is the one that's doing this. Literally, he was like, do you have any baby pictures of me? You know, one of my coworkers needs it. And I was like, why? And he was like, I don't know. And I was like, I bet they're doing that social media trend. And he was like, what? They did it. They posted it today. And I was like, see? And so I had to like show him. And he was like, I don't understand this trend.
When he lives to 120 because his stress hormones are so much lower. Like, no, I joke because I love social media, but I do think it'll always be like, not love hate is putting it too, broadly, but there is so much that has changed as social media has become so much more part of our life.
Absolutely.
And the more breaks I take from social media, the more I'm aware of like, I am a healthier version of myself when I am on social media less, period, full stop, undebatable. And I don't know, to be honest, like how I'm going to long-term weigh that out in loving to create content, but knowing that I'm a better version of myself when I'm not on.
Agreed.
To be continued for both of us. What about making a video trashing CBT and those who use it?
I would not do it in those words. I mean, and I was trained CBT. I would definitely make a video talking about maybe populations CBT doesn't work for, or some of the criticisms of CBT. I just don't think it's my style to trash an entire modality, and two, people that use it. I think that goes back to the black and white that we were talking about, because you're like overgeneralizing. And I didn't even mean to do that, but that's a CBT cognitive distortion. You're overgeneralizing like this modality that is very helpful for some people and is very unhelpful for other people. I wouldn't trash it.
If we were going to use that example of exactly what we're talking about, if tomorrow some random therapist points a video of this is the reasons why CBT is trash, versus if that video starts with, here are the populations that I wouldn't recommend using CBT on, we know the first video will get way more views and attention. And there's something deeply both sad and disturbing about that.
Agreed.
I think it's something we need to think about because, again, I think all of us as professionals are getting pulled into, again, the high emotionality, the high all or nothing. And I don't think that these aren't the conversations we have when we get together. We go to conferences and we really sink into how gray and nuanced all situations really are. Would you ever post about what you eat in a day?
So my strong reaction comes from a place of, as somebody that works with eating disorders, I despise those videos. So no, I would not post like a what I eat in a day video. Would I post of, I went to this really good restaurant and this is what I ate for dinner and things like that? Sure. But like an actual what I eat in the day, no, I wouldn't. But I know that's my own bias coming from like the eating disorder realm.
The reason I drew that example is I knew you would say that, and I knew that would be the context that you would bring. And yet, what a popular video that non-professionals post. I was like,
All the time.
here's what I eat in a day to get my macros for this protein. Like every video of that exists. But
Yeah.
within our realm, I would think, and again, I would think most of us would stop and think of like, this is for the whole population of individuals that struggle with disordered eating. There's no way this would be helpful by any means and will be triggering.
Yeah.
What about you crying after a session?
So I have recorded a couple videos of me crying. I don't know if I have one that's still in my drafts and that I recorded it like a year ago. I think I've posted me crying once, but it was like tears of joy after getting some news about a patient in the hospital. But I always delay the post. So I guess going back to that, like once again, it would depend on the context. But I think for me personally, if I were to post it, there would have to be like, what is the intention of posting it? But two, personally, I would delay the timing of the post so that any clients I saw that day, if they came across the video, wouldn't assume it was about them. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And I think that is a nuanced way that a lot of us navigate that. And in a related way, would you talk about a client in a vague or non-identifying way?
So I was going to say no. However, because if people have followed me, they may have seen this video. Many years ago, one of my clients or patients passed away, and I made a video about ethics and do you attend a client's funeral? And I got mixed messages because obviously, with context, people could figure it out. I will say I did end up seeking supervision. I went to the funeral, and mom of my client was aware that I was going to make that. She told me, she followed me. And we had a conversation, if you're not comfortable with it. And she was like, no, I think more people need to like see this human side. So I don't want to say I will never, because I have. But generally speaking, I do not, because my clients are teens and they're on social media. Many of them have found my account. And years ago, I did have a client be like, you made this video. Is that about me? And I was like, no, it wasn't. But like a lot of the themes are very similar. And that kind of swayed like, oh, I need to be even more broad. Like I used to, I mean, I think used to do these too, like make like back and forth videos, like I'm the therapist and I'm the client and things like that. And I stopped doing a lot of that because of clients, that one comment, but also like fear, like, oh, you know, I'm having these conversations in many therapy sessions, but if my client comes across this, are they going to think I'm reenacting our therapy session? And I would absolutely hate for one of my clients to feel like I've broken their trust in that way. So that was a very long-winded answer. So my general rule of thumb is no. And I don't want to speak in black and white.
I appreciated all that. And I appreciate you sharing the story about, you know, do you attend a client's funeral? Because I think the thing that is difficult about this is our clients can and will identify with so many things we're talking about. And you could ask any mental health professional this. Do the same themes come up, you know, across your work? Absolutely. Humans, again, although there's always, you know, variety, diversity, and people's narratives are rich and different, themes, patterns, struggles, you know, in different categories, not even just talking about disorders, relational patterns and whatever, they're very similar. I too have had the experience where a client has been like, was that about me? And it's always interesting because you're like, no, like
No.
I wasn't thinking of you when I made that video, but that's a common theme that comes up of, you know, I'm pulling a different example now, but of like struggling with low self-esteem due to a lack of attention in childhood. A lot of people can relate to that.
Yeah.
Many clients over the years who that's a theme in their life. But it is really interesting because when you're a creator and a professional, something you really need to think about. And I certainly have seen examples where I'm like, they are talking about a specific person. What if that specific person watched, this video? So
Yeah. I've seen that too. And that's where I go back to the ethics. And this conversation actually came up recently on Threads, and it ended up being like an AI generated conversation. But that's the other thing. You don't know what is AI and what's real. And and it wasn't even a therapist, but like a lot of therapists were chiming in like, hey, this is breaking your client's confidentiality. People, and people are like, there's no identifying information. And a lot of therapists were like, but if the client could identify that this is their text, that is breaking their trust. Like, yes, there might not be a HIPAA, but even though you can argue that like screenshots could be whatever. But like, even if it's not a HIPAA violation, if a client could easily identify that that is them, and that goes into the whole discussion of like, a conception I see, and I don't want to say it's a misconception online from non-mental health professionals is, are mental health professionals using their clients to make money on social media? My first response is, if you've ever been paid by Meta, you don't know that I get like 47 cents from Meta, like a month. Like
I have gotten 1 penny before. They have given me 1 penny.
1 penny. So like there's that, which I know we're kind of like joking about that. But two, like, no, you shouldn't be using your clients, in my opinion, for clout. I agree with themes. And like I've definitely made videos like if I'm noticing like burnout is coming up a lot, or I see a lot of cannabinoid hyperemesis in the hospital, like over the past couple of years. And I've made videos, just general education on cannabinoid hyperemesis and things like that. And like maybe a client is like, oh, that does relate. But if you're like, oh, in session today, my client and I were discussing their relationship and they were having this issue that a lot of people have. Okay, you could have made that video just talking about the issue that a lot of people have, instead of that whole background of like, today we were in session and this is the conversation we had, which brought up this point. But that's just my take.
I think you've hit it on the head in so many different ways of the things like we have to consider and think about. And not just, can someone identify this person? Can this person identify themselves? Which is, again, very different. And what are you prioritizing? Are you prioritizing the views and the penny Meta's going to give you? Or are you prioritizing the people you have a true, professional relationship with, which is those you take under, in a clinical sense or practitioner sense? Oh, I've enjoyed this nuanced conversation so much.
Same.
And yet, if someone was out there, they're a professional who's thinking about creating content, what advice would you give them generally about being ethical, being professional? How the hell you navigate this all?
If it's something you don't want your clients to know about you, don't post it. Refer to your ethics code to make sure you're always remaining ethical. I mean, I think a lot of the things we've talked about weigh risks and benefits, but really, like, if you are listening and you're like, I'm scared to make content, but I have these great ideas, like, go ahead and make a post. Like, it is hard starting. It is hard hearing the different opinions and views, but if your intent is good if you know your ethics inside and out, if you're not sharing something you wouldn't want your clients, or if you work with kids, your clients' parents, or if you don't work for yourself, your boss finding, go ahead and make the post. You never know who's going to find it, who it's going to help, even if it's just one person that it helps. I think that's important and it makes a difference.
I love that frame. And we preach all the time is like, you can't be controlled by fear. Mm-hmm. And there is so much benefit to this of being a professional, sharing your knowledge, sharing your insights, advocating for people, advocating politically. There's so much good that can come from this. And yet all of us on the fly are navigating what is professional, what is ethical, and we can always consult. We can always consult. And I know we do all the time.
Yep,
we
absolutely.
share posts back and forth of like, what do you think about this? What comes to mind here? I think that's such an underutilized tool that a lot of us as professionals and creators do. And I know when we talk to each other, it's not necessarily, would you do this? Because there's some things I would do that you wouldn't do, and you would do
and
that
vice
I wouldn't
versa,
do. But we talk generally of like, we do that mental math of what's the benefits, what's the potential harm, and
is there blind spots? Is there anything I'm missing? Yeah.
Gosh, I love having this long conversation with you.
I know.
Because it's impossible to dissect all this just in a short video on the internet. And I hope people listening, part of this, of how you see professionalism, is who you are, where you come from. And the ethics, although they're there and there are specific guidelines, we navigate this gray using principles. And I would hate to be on an ethics sort of committee or board having to sort of go through and make decisions because they're not as clear cut as you think. But this process is so important.
I agree.
Where can people find you, Dr. Jess? What kind of content do you make? Tell us all the deets.
So my handle across Instagram, TikTok, Threads, YouTube is Jessica Lee, PhD. Lee is Leigh. I have my own podcast, Psych Talk. As for the content, I have realized recently my content really depends on the platform I'm on. So like Instagram is like primarily educational content, longer form videos. I do post political content, which we didn't even get into. But I am of the belief and frame that therapy is political. I work in a hospital. Healthcare is political. So it's more nuanced content, longer form video, carousel posts. Threads, it's just like political and the pit. So if you're looking for therapy content, you're probably not going to find it over there unless my Instagram content goes over there. Longer form nuanced content is going to be my podcast. So it really just depends. And TikTok is really just Instagram.
It doesn't matter where you follow Dr. Jess. You will be connected. You're always such a good advocate. You are always bringing up things that are happening in the now, even when they're nuanced. I know reliably when I see your post that you won't over sensationalize anything, and yet you will advocate for those who've been oppressed and marginalized. And again, you're such a gift to us, both personally and professionally.
Thank you, Justin. This was so great. It's been too long since we've done a podcast and chatted.
I love how the idea was this would be an hour episode. And I felt like we could go 2.5 hours, and we'll have to do a whole episode on the political and the topics that we've covered many times on our old podcast, Welcome to Therapy. But it's always great seeing you. Everybody, follow Dr. Jess. Link down below. Thanks always for being here. Comment, like, share it with somebody. We'll see you next time right here on Drop In.
Bye.